Good afternoon, Baltimore. That is so much better. So you guys fed? Yes? Was the grub good? Did we thank Associated Black Charities and the President's Roundtable for feeding you? And Morgan Wheeler and some other really good people. Welcome to our second panel of the day, Political Literacy. I cannot tell you how cool this panel is going to be. We are missing two people from this panel so far. My political mentor, Kurt Anderson. I'm putting him on blast on the internet right now. And somewhere psychically it's getting to him that he is not here. And hopefully we'll be joined later by Kenneth Morrison, who is a disengaged voter. So it's kind of no irony that the disengaged voter is not here. I tried, y'all, I tried. Gotta love it. Anyway, again, we're gonna bring up Felicia and Felina. I want Felina to come up this time too, from the backlist to introduce the video for the Wahlberg Project. These young people are doing good work with media arts in Baltimore. And they have prepared a short video as of what, Thursday? Thursday, y'all. Of their thoughts about political literacy in Baltimore. So I'm going to have them introduce it.
Good afternoon. I'm Felicia Pride.
Good afternoon. I'm Felina Pride.
We're sisters, if that wasn't clear. And for those of you who may be new, we run an organization called Backlist, which is a content developer. We do creative projects that connect media, entertainment, and education. And one of our projects is the Wahlberg Project, which received a grant from the Ignite Foundation, an Ignition grant. And what we're doing is we're arming 11 kids and 11 teens in the Wahlberg community to go out and make films about their community that will be screened at the Wahlberg Library. That's actually where we meet. We are a fan of libraries and an advocate of libraries. So the film screenings will be in the first week of April. So I'll definitely hope to be able to reach out to many of you to come to that. But what we did, they started playing. Oh, she said like us on Facebook. We are on Facebook. The Wahlberg Project. But we did start having them play with their cameras this week, so we thought it'd be a good idea to have them share their thoughts on the 3 prompts or the 3 conversations of today. So this one is actually focused on political leadership. It was kind of hard, a challenge, so we focused on political leadership, and it's a pretty short video. Thank you.
Political leadership, there are a couple of things that can be doing better as far as they could do more to interact with the communities. Like an example of it could be if they would come out every once in a while and actually have like a cleanup day where they're like city officials actually come out and they're in the streets with you helping picking it up because it might at the same time influence the community to actually start cleaning it up themselves instead of having to depend on the government to come help them.
The political leadership in Baltimore. Mayor Stephanie Rawlings-Blake, well, she could have a lot of, I would say, a lot of groups where you could have like people more aware of how you can stop gang violence and how gang violence comes about and what the signs are so they know what to do and how to confront it.
Education could be better. I think our schools could be better. Our schools need to be looking better because people don't go to school just to go to schools. People, it would be nice to come to school and see things. Like, yeah, my school's not all that great, but yeah.
After school programs for students, maybe if the student doesn't want to do an extracurricular activity as far as, I don't know, sports or like any game clubs or anything, maybe they can have there's a mentoring program where city officials come out and they take them on trips. Or they can do something like the debate team and they can take them on they can take the children along with them on campaigns and actually show them how it's done. So it gives them something to do.
A few housekeeping notes. We are turning off cell phones or putting them on vibrate, please. I would love for you to tweet. It's Amplify Baltimore. Welcome to our viewers on live stream. We welcome your questions. Everybody got cell phones off? Great, because you're going to want to hear everything these panelists have to say. I'm really grateful again that I have an incredible cadre of friends that I can call on in the time of need, and clearly with my voice, this was a time of need. So my dear friend Yolanda Maria Welch has agreed to step in as moderator for this panel, and man, when you see these questions, it's going to be great. So again, I just want to remind you that the purpose of these dialogues is to have an understanding of our past, acknowledge where we are presently, and to start to think very broadly about where we want to be as the people of Baltimore. Again, when you're preparing your questions, when you're thinking about your questions, think about them in a generative way, in ways that would allow us to think through how we get to next steps with regard to Baltimore. We're going to limit soliloquies, and I'm going to say this once, and I'm not going to say it again. If I hear a soliloquy, I'm going to come up on you and stop you. I want brilliant questions that lead us to action. Are we all down for that? Great. So, without further ado, I am honored and delighted to bring you Yolanda Maria Welch, who is the president of Respira Medical, an incredible advocate in the Latino community, and also stunningly beautiful, as you can see. Thank you so much, Yolanda. And by the way, somebody lost glasses, so if these are your glasses, just come see me.
Thank you very much, April, and I just want to take a moment to applaud you and your efforts. You're a remarkable woman. I'm very blessed to also call you my friend, so thank you so much, and everyone, thank you, April, for having this dialogue. As April said, I'm Yolanda Maria Welch. I go by the name Maria, and I am very blessed to be the founder and CEO of Respira Medical, a respiratory home care company in Baltimore, and I'm very homegrown. I was born and raised here in Baltimore, Maryland, and Respira is a product of the wonderful opportunities that Baltimore has, such as Women Entrepreneurs of Baltimore, who gave me my opportunity to start my business, the Maryland Department of Economic Development, the Maryland Department of License and Regulation, through a program called the SEA, Self-Employment Assistance, and that was about 10 years ago when I was homeless and survived domestic violence, had my share of life's challenges, and very blessed to be where I am with a company that is thriving and doing very well, almost 60 employees, and it just says a lot of what possibilities are here in our community, really, truly. So I'm very proud of that. So when I was talking with April, I was very blessed to have been asked to moderate this panel, because there's an incredibly impressive group of individuals that I'm very honored and in awe to share this time with. And I'd like to ask them if they would please come up and take a seat, and then we can commence our dialogue. What we really want to talk about during this, these almost 2 hours, if you will, it's about learning the political process here in Baltimore. We noticed in the last election that there wasn't the engagement that we had truly had hoped to see, and trying to understand the disconnect and why that is happening, why that has occurred, trying to get people engaged, understanding what is behind that. And it's about actions, and that's why April wants to have this dialogue with incredible dynamic individuals, with the community, to understand and have that face-to-face contact and communication about how can we make this happen and work. And then our political candidates and our political representatives can truly represent the voice, because they can hear you, they can see you, they can feel you. And that's really what this dialogue is about, and understanding how to start to untangle that. So I'm very honored. I'm going to just list the names of the people here, because I don't want to take too much time, and then we can start our dialogue. Mr. Armstead B.C. Jones, Sr., the Director of the Baltimore City Board of Education. Mr. Bill Ferguson, State Senator of the 46th District. Kurt Anderson, who is really in trouble with April. Helen Bentley, former Congresswoman of the 2nd District. John Morris, the Dean of Urban Planning and Community Development for Sojourner Douglas College. Kenneth Morrison, I don't believe he's here yet. He is? Is that? No, not yet, okay. And he will talk about being a disengaged voter. Maggie McIntosh, the state delegate, the 43rd District, and Mary Washington, PhD, state delegate, the 43rd District. Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for being here. I truly appreciate that, and on behalf of April and everyone here. Having our discussion and starting, I'm going to ask a question to start out about, you know, the reason that we're here today is to discuss honestly about what we're seeing, about the solutions that we need to move our city and our region forward. Moving ahead will require strong, focused, and outcome-driven leaders. Can you define for us your definition of leadership and how those qualities will be a part of moving Baltimore forward? Can I start with Mary Washington?
Of elected officials, so
it's
nice.
That on purpose, being a Welsh.
Now it's on, right? Is everyone here? Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Mary Washington, and I am very excited to be a delegate-elect today for the 43rd Legislative District. And I also want to thank all of you for coming out and participating in this conversation and giving us an opportunity to really amplify Baltimore. I mean, I think I also want to say to Ms. Garrett that choosing that term, amplify, around Baltimore is very important because it does recognize the strengths that we have here and the progress and opportunities that we have here, and that sometimes it's not a matter of creating something new, but amplifying those things that are working and providing supports and building the capacity for the individuals that are working hard. So again, I'm really pleased to be a part of this and also honored to be a part of this board. So a leader, I think, does just that. I think a leader is someone who is engaged with their fellow citizens and residents, is willing to listen and put themselves and their energy and their commitment out to be used for the betterment of other people. And hopefully, I know we'll get an opportunity to talk about how that fits in the context of political literacy, because I think those of us that are politically engaged are doing those things. We're acting, we're engaging, we're looking at opportunities to facilitate that which needs to be done in our community. So I think that that's a definition of a leader. And being able, I guess one other thing would be to make sure that other folks are coming along with you, because if you're just out there speaking and you don't have other people engaged who are willing to travel along with you, then your leadership is hollow.
Thank you so very much. I'd like to ask Maggie McIntosh, would you please?
Well, I actually, oops. Am I on now? Yeah, I'm on now. I think, you know, when you try to define leadership, there's several kinds of, or types of leaders. I mean, there's not one type, one definition doesn't fit all leadership. I suppose the leadership that I'd like to at least talk a little bit about today, the leadership model, if you will, is leaders create, I think, good and great leaders create a state of mind. And to give you an example of that, I just watched last weekend a movie about Harvey Milk, who was the first openly gay elected official in this country, and he ran, I think, 3 or 4 times before he finally got elected. But one of the things that he discovered during the course of his trying to run for election is he would go out into San Francisco and he would talk about what was wrong, what was wrong, what was wrong, what was wrong. And one day somebody walked him out of a meeting and said, you know, you tell us what's wrong, but you don't give us hope. And I think that that was the transformation probably in Harvey that helped him finally not only get elected, but be a beacon of tremendous hope, not only in his district, but in this country and in this world. I think, you know, that example was alive and well a couple of years ago. I mean, I think we saw for the first time in this country, and all of us felt great hope around the election of Barack Obama. So I do think great leaders do, many great leaders, not all, do have the capacity, the talent and capacity to understand how you create a state of mind. And the state of mind that we have seen in Baltimore many times from our leaders has helped us move forward to better our schools or to really take on very tough tasks. And I think a state of mind is the kind of leadership, in fact, that Baltimore needs, a leader that can actually create that for us.
Thank you so much, Maggie. A newly elected official, Bill Ferguson, I'd like to hear your insight on that.
Good afternoon, everyone. No? There it goes. Good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. This is a pretty amazing event. And I think April is a good example of the leadership that happens when people dream big and are willing to innovate and think about new ways of doing things. I approach the concept of leadership as it being a neutral term. It can be positive, but it can also be negative. I sort of see leadership as an institution or an individual with power. And we generally, I think a lot of times in society, think of power as a bad thing. Does that help? Okay. We think of power as a bad thing, but fundamentally, I think power is the basis of human action. Things don't happen without power. This is a very IAF principle, Industrial Areas Foundation, that power is organized people, organized money that are focused on a message that matters. That can be a positive message, it can be a negative message, it can be power used for good and power used for ill. But leadership is the embodiment of that power to do something. And so I think it's how that power gets used that is the ultimate basis by which one's leadership should be judged.
Thank you, Mr. Ferguson. Helen Bentley, you have been a pillar in our community and an enormous, incredible leader. Love to hear your insight on leadership.
Well, thank you, Maria. I am the only Republican here. And I'm kind of pulling in my shoulders. And Maggie's known me too long. Actually, I grew up at a time when women were not allowed or even considered to have the capability of being leaders. And it was tough getting through that time, but it required determination, it required knowledge, it required, you just don't give up, you still gotta go. You know what you're doing, keep going. When I came to Baltimore 65 years ago, I was thrown almost, not intentionally, but down at the Port of Baltimore. And it was a challenge. I'd never seen water before, because I grew up in the high mountains of Nevada. And here were ships, and here were people working, and here was the international center of the world. And I made up my mind that this is a great place to be. And I worked at it, and I worked at it, and I worked at it. And I got to know the individual people who were there, whose livelihoods depended upon the port, upon those ships coming in. And I did everything I could to publicize them. We started a television show that ran for 15 years on the Port of Baltimore. And with that, I suddenly became a leader. But it wasn't in a planned arena. It was something that developed as I moved along. And it was only because I learned and was willing to learn more and was willing to help others along the way. And you have to do that. And from there, I went on and ran for Congress, took 3 tries, won, and I think I became For a Republican in Maryland, Maggie's good. I think I was kind of welcome because I worked with people. And my main thrust was jobs for Marylanders, jobs for Baltimoreans. We had to keep that going so people could earn a decent living and keep going forward. And I'm still doing it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Helen. Thank you very much. This is a really good segue to Mr. John Morris, who is an urban developer planning to community development. So could you kindly share with us?
Sure. The occasion, again, I will say good morning to everybody. The occasion that brings us is this discussion of civic disengagement, which is interesting when you consider that 55 years ago we had a wonderful example of total commitment and total engagement, and we can ask, well, what happened to us since? 55 years ago, the black community of Montgomery, Alabama was engaged in a boycott that changed the nation. It was a tactic that required total commitment by everybody, or it wouldn't work. And begs the question, well, what kind of leadership sustained that kind of effort? And quite plainly, it was a leadership that enabled ordinary people not only to try, but to accomplish the impossible. And that's what we should be aspiring toward as we're looking not just to get 100% participation of our citizenry in the lives of this community, we're just trying to beat, what, 35 to 40%? So we should ask ourselves, what has happened in the 55 years that transpired since 1955 that brought us to the same condition? Because much of the population of Baltimore City is indistinguishable from the population, the black population of Montgomery, Alabama, 55 years ago.
Thank you very much. And that's another wonderful entree to a conversation with Mr. Armstead Jones, Director of the Baltimore City Board of Elections, talking about the civil disengagement as well.
You know, good afternoon to everyone, and of course it's great to be here to share in this panel discussion today. We do have some great folk here that have had some experience from Helen, from our Congresswoman on down through the years. You know, when I look at leadership, one of the things that I always think about leadership is not about oneself. It's about what's in the best interests of an individual, a group, a committee. Sometimes we show great leadership, but of course it's always self-centered. Leadership is not a self-centered. If you're self-centered and a leader, to me there brings about some issues that it's about that individual and not about the overall project that you're working on. And it's a shared vision. If there's a vision there, the only way that a leader can carry out that vision is with the help of that committee or that neighborhood. And of course, a lot of times I think about our young people after 30-some years in education before I came into elections. Our young people need great leaders to be able to look at and to emulate, to see us at work and to be able to have a goal and a focus for their future. So I think it's very important, and we do have great leaders that are around us, and sometimes we, as those persons that are there to support them, we need to support them just a little more, because when we do that, you'd be surprised how much more that leader can do with support.
Thank you very much. You know, we talked about the leadership role with this civic engagement, and we look at what happened in the past election. We look at the number of people who decided to participate in the political process, the turnout, and over the last several election cycles, they've been a bit disappointing. So I ask all of you that why do you think there is this obvious disconnect from the political and social process, and how can citizens be re-engaged to the importance of participation in the civic process? And I guess I'd like to go back to Armstead. Could you start with that, please, Armstead?
Yeah, you know, one of the things I've found over the last few years in the election process, a lot of citizens have become frustrated with not only the system in some cases, but individuals that are running, because, you know, we have gotten candidates that will motivate voters, and they come out and vote. Then there are cases where we don't have people to come out. I think to spend the amount of money that we do spend in the city and come up with a turnout 22, 23% is not a good representation of what we really should be doing. And it seems the more we educate, sometimes the less the voters and citizens participate. So we have to try to motivate, continue to educate the voters about the importance of voting, and that it plays a big part in their future, their neighborhoods, jobs. It's very important that we exercise our right to vote.
Thank you very much. John, I'd like to talk to you because you're involved with the redevelopment of Old Town. Can you tell us how you feel that would impact, what is impacting that community and this issue about coming out to vote?
Well, I think we have a comparable challenge in Old Town, which is engaging the residents of Old Town to participate in the decision-making and the remaking of their own community. The need is to find out from people who aren't participating what they require to participate, and perhaps some very hard thinking about ourselves to embrace the extent to which perhaps this outcome of low voter turnout is a consequence of how we interact with people who are not necessarily active in a process as political people we're used to. Clearly, the participation of people who have not shown up at the polls on a regular basis is going to transform how we do politics. And I think that means everybody, and not just the people who suddenly are party to that. That's what we've tried to do in Old Town, which is, how do you go about remaking a community that requires you to do different things, ask different people, to assume that everybody who's part of your process has an essential and fundamental contribution to make. And I think politically, that's a big move, because one of the realities of politics is driven by people who have money to contribute. And many of the people who aren't showing up at the polls aren't writing big checks, and we're going to have to find a definite role for those people to change the future politically for us in Baltimore.
Thank you very much. Helen, you've seen this landscape for quite some time. Can you share with us your thoughts on that? Helen? I'm sorry, could you share your thoughts with us regarding that, what he was talking about with the disengaged voters and getting them involved?
I must confess that I'm not hearing all the questions because I have a hearing aid problem and this big room is aggravating it, but I will attempt. I think one of the problems, and this may hinge on what Mr. Morris just said, there's too much money spent on elections today. And frankly, I was absolutely stunned at the quantity when I saw the amounts of monies that have been spent in recent elections. God, what we could do with that money for people and for getting manufacturing back in this country. I really think we need to think again somewhere along the line of, should all elections be paid by the taxpayers through various funds that are set up and not have to have the quantity? I have already from the General Assembly, because they go in next week on the 13th, right, Maggie? 12th. All right. Before the 12th, all of the members of the Maryland General Assembly have to either have fundraisers or they can't do anything until after April the 10th. Okay. Then they're going to get busy and go through it again. The members of the Congress who have just gone in this week, They are already starting for the next election. $3 or $4 million now for a seat in the House of Representatives. And the senators, because they run every 2 years. The senators run every 6 years, and theirs are getting up to $10 to $20 million or more a campaign. I'm sorry, but I think campaign funding and elections have just gotten out of hand financially, and something should be done to analyze what the hell are we doing in this country and where we really should be going. I think that's one of the reasons the voters are turned off. They hear about all this money. Now, why in the heck should I vote? That's my opinion.
It's incredible, Helen. A lot of people here tend to be acknowledging what you're saying very positively. So, and I'd like to ask Maggie, because Maggie, you've had some history now. So, what have you encountered?
I do have history. Actually, I do agree with Helen on the public financing of campaigns. It's very complex. I'm not going to get into it in 2 or 3 minutes. But I do think that to educate voters is going to through a publicly financed system is going to require getting media, getting a whole number of sectors on board. Because it is television where most people get their information now. That's not done by politicians. That's just where people get information. It's TV, it's radio, written material, community forums. All of that would have to be paid for. Yeah. And when you think about that, getting the media involved in a movement like this, I think that's actually the first hurdle we have to face. I think you'd be surprised how many people in elected office would support public financing. As a matter of fact, it passed the House of Delegates, I think, last year or the year before. But let me just say this, that one of the frustrations I'm going to share with you as someone who is elected is that I think part of the disengagement between me and my community or my district is that I think that over and over and over again you hear, well, she's a politician or he's a politician. They won't meet with you if you don't give them money. Politicians, they're all in it for themselves. Not all of us are. And in fact, I'd say the vast majority of us are not. And so one of the dynamics that it gets set up here nationally and certainly locally is that I do believe I have constituents that believe that to meet with me, contact with me, have interaction with me, and unless they belong to a community group where, those of us who are in elected office drop by and interact, I think they really do believe you have to give me money. You don't have to give me money. To call me, email me, have contact with me. And the last thing I'm going to say about this is that as an elected official, it's going to sound odd coming out of my mouth, but I believe that trade associations and I believe that organized groups that present themselves as advocates for some sector of people have gotten in the way of elected officials communicating with citizens. And sometimes they misrepresent what that group that they're supposed to be representing in fact feels. And so I'm a person who has come kind of full circle around trade associations, advocacy groups, so on and so forth. They come in, I know they have their agenda is the agenda of their board, maybe, but I'm not real clear. In fact, I'm very clear, as a matter of fact, that they do not represent the groups, the people that they advocate for in many cases. And I think that's a barrier for us.
It is.
Thank you, Maggie. Thank you very much. Bill, you just went through a great challenge yourself with the seat that you hold now, so piggybacking on what Maggie was saying and what Helen had said as well, could you give us some insight?
Absolutely. This is something that since making the decision to run, I've sort of joked quite a bit that if I knew what it would have been like during the process beforehand, it's probably pretty likely I wouldn't have done it. it was much different than I expected. And one of the biggest sort of takeaways is that I've come to realize that I think that the system is designed to dampen voter turnout. And why do I say that? As campaigns become more sophisticated, we're much more strategic and efficient about how we spend our money. So in my district, there are roughly 130,000 people, a little less than 40,000 registered Democrats, which matters because it's a primary generally. So 40,000 people, and we had about 8,300 people vote in this past election. So 8,300, and then that was the turnout that decided who was going to be representing 130,000. Well, when we looked at the race, and we say, all right, we have, let's say it's $100,000. If we're going to spend $100,000, where do we want to spend that money? We see that there are people that have voted in 3 of the last 3 primary elections. There are people that have voted in 2 of the last 3 primary elections. And then there's those people out there that have voted in no primary elections. Well, if I'm going to spend my money efficiently, and I know who those people are, I know where they live, I know where they vote, I'm going to spend my money where I know I'm going to get the biggest bang for the buck, and that's on people that already vote. So the system's set up not for me to reach out and find more voters in the system to come out and vote, but to persuade the people that I know will be at the polls on Election Day. And so we look at 2008, and there's a lot of talk about the system bringing in more people voted, there was a lot more inspiration. Well, that's sort of true. I think it's a great thing to talk about, it's a good message, but at the end of the day, the Obama campaign knew that with traditional voters, they couldn't win. And so they had an incentive as part of their efficient targeting machine to get out non-traditional voters. Had that not been the case, there probably wouldn't have been a push for the absentee, the first-time voters, the college voters. And so the system is really designed to, at the end of the day, and as it gets more sophisticated, to dampen turnout rather than expand the electorate. That's my sort of thought.
Thank you very much. And Mary, you as well, because you're also one who truly believed about the grassroots and getting people to come out that hadn't voted before.
Yes, yeah, and might I, if you indulge me, I'd like to just sort of roll this back a little bit. I think I was really excited to talk about the topic of political literacy and let us have an opportunity to think about what does it mean to be political and what does it mean to be literate in this politics that we have. And so I don't necessarily, I mean, we've sort of led the discussion towards voting and voting in the traditional system that we do it on the second Tuesday, in September or November. Was it the first one? Thank you. But we have to actually think about what does it mean to be political. So when I think about politics, I actually think about it as being engaged in the community in some kind of way. And actually I wrote this down. It's to be, to be political, you have to be empathetic. You have to be in tune to the desires and wants and motivations of other people. You have to sort of be a person that's able to think about, well, how do we manage all of these desires and needs and motivations? And then as politicians, who you might be a Republican, identify as Republican in a traditional sense, or a Democrat, big D, or you might be an independent or a Green, but still you're trying to figure out a way to sort of get other people to move and shape and develop policy and make decisions, right? So then to be literate, to be literate in that process, what does that mean? And I think one of the reasons we have low voter turnout in the most traditional and somewhat easiest way of being political is that we haven't taught or provided opportunities for people to decode and read. For you to be literate, you have to read the political process. You have to see it going on around you. And that's some of us being more engaged and being out in the community, but that's also you being out in the community. You're turning off sort of this vicarious, if you are a political being. A lot of folks do it, and I tweet, I do all that, but we have this kind of virtual relationship with each other, through the internet or through CNN. I have friends, most of my friends, I think one of the reasons I wasn't as successful in my first run is that most of my friends knew more about national and international politics than they did about local, and come to understand that it's the Democratic primary, in Baltimore City. And then for other folks, they're just working every day trying to make a living, trying to get their kids on the bus, trying to work in their schools. So they haven't had the opportunity to learn how to read the signs that tell them that, hey, this thing that's going on in this process is affecting your ability to work. And then if you can decode it, then you have to actually understand it. So what is it? So we all learn to speak in code to each other, and we learn to read that, but I don't know that the public always understands that. And then how do we express this? So I'd like us, if we have an opportunity in the dialogue, to really think about it. What is it to be political? Because I think I really am sort of tying into what Delegate McIntosh is saying, in that, you know, it's not a bad thing to be political. It's not wrong or inherently evil to want to take your voice and to go vote and help make decisions to make your community better. But somehow, someone, and we have to think about who's benefiting from low voter turnout in poor communities, who has spent a lot of time convincing you that all we're trying to do is to take money out of your pocket, when the people that are taking money out of their pocket are actually ones that are benefiting from the campaign ads and all of those things. So my response to that is to really there's voting, but there's also a broader way in which we need to talk about, as human beings in society, how are we political with each other, and how can we, you know, improve the literacy in that.
Thank you very much. In the green room, we had a discussion about being a politician. Some people view you as celebrities, and really it's about being a public leader, and it's about engaging the public. How do you break that down? One of the questions was, you know, what does a city council person do? What does a congresswoman do? Helen, going to you, what exactly does a congresswoman do? What exactly is the impact? Because I don't think people really understand all this. It's breaking those things down to the basics.
Well, many of you have, excuse me, many of you have watched Congress getting underway again this year, the 112th Congress. I was in the 99th through the 103rd Congress, and I ran for Congress because I wanted a 50-foot channel leading into the port of Baltimore. That was my goal. That was my goal because that meant jobs in Maryland. It meant that the Port of Baltimore would continue. And I knew that I knew more about the port than the incumbent at that time, who really was holding up future development. And that was my issue. So if you're going to Congress, you've got to have an issue. And you have to be willing to, let's say, die for it. I was willing to die for it. And I ran 3 times before I won, because I felt that issue was so very important. Now, Congress has the big bucks. And the big bucks in spending always start in the House of Representatives. But whether or not those programs are finished depends upon what the Senate of the United States does. Now, each state has so many members of Congress, of the House, but they each have 2 senators. Every state has 2 senators. In Maryland, we've had 8 members of the House of Representatives for the last 30 years, and we will again, according to what the present census is indicating. That means that each member of the House represents or has over 750,000, I think it's going to be about 750 to 800,000 constituents in each congressional district. There are a total of 435 members of the House. And here is where the little problems are. Now, we've heard a lot about earmarks, that Congress should get rid of earmarks and they shouldn't be. You know, I'm sorry, I don't agree with that. Because a person is elected from his or her district to bring home the bacon for her his or her district, whatever that is. The channel deepening would never have gotten through if there were no earmarks. I can assure you of that. And we wouldn't have a 50-foot channel today, and the Port of Baltimore would not be one of 2 ports on the East Coast that has a 50-foot channel. Very important for the future of world trade. The Congress, I used to meet every Saturday somewhere in my district, have open meetings for anybody who wanted to come discuss issues, discuss their problems. Now, each member of the House has a staff of 18 persons. You may think that that's a lot of people. It really isn't. When you are involved with the individual issues that your constituents might have, and that involves Social Security, it involves pensions, it involves jobs, it involves just a whole world of things. But an issue that the Congress takes care of, you deal with a member of the state legislature. Maybe Maggie McIntosh's office has the issue, and you deal with them. But that's what we do. We deal on issues, we deal on problems, and then we fight for them. One of my big issues that I fought and led the fight on, talking about leadership, was not to allow NAFTA, the North Atlantic Trade Agreement, to go through. I was against it, and I still think I was damn right. If I might say so.
Thank you, Helen.
Too many jobs have gone to Mexico.
Thank you very much.
But anyhow.
Thank you very much, Helen, for that. I appreciate that. And Bill, you were looking at me there because I think you have something dynamic to tell me about being a delegate. Exactly what does that mean?
Well, he's the Senate.
I'm sorry, the Senate.
Almost. Don't worry.
Forgive me. My gosh, the Senate.
I forget sometimes.
I meant to say that. Forgive me.
Well, I was going to, obviously I don't have very much experience about what you do. I have some ideas about what but the sort of internal contrast about, conflict that I've been having, I guess, is that, I've come to realize that as an elected official, there are certain principles and ideas and programs that I believe in. But at the end of the day, I won't be the one doing any of it. So I will merely be advocating for the actual actors that do the hard work and get the work done. Which is an interesting position because I think a lot of times we place a lot of emphasis on politicians and say, well, they haven't done this and they haven't done that. And that's the case, but at the end of the day, I really won't do anything about having great schools. I won't be able to do anything to say we have safer neighborhoods. I'll enable people to help that happen, and I'll help to bring groups together. But as an individual actor, it's not me that is able to do the work. And that's kind of a struggle for me because we take a lot of credit for all the positive things. But it's a deeper situation.
Talked about here, all the opportunities that we seem to be missing.
I think I have something that's scintillating and simple, which is listen to what the people say. I think Delegate McIntosh said something that I found astounding when she noted that there seemed to be a segment of our population that got in the way of the people and those who would represent the government, advocacy groups. I generalize it even more. There's a whole professional class of people who make their living speaking for somebody else. And first of all, as part of that class, as a recovering lawyer, I acknowledge it. But I think it's one of the things that has created and provided the catalyst for the disengagement. If there is somebody I can count on who speaks my passion, I don't need to have my passion. I can spend my days sitting in my home watching TV and taking care of my children. I'm not going to be out there doing the work that the senator brings back to my community to get done. So our challenge in Old Town is not to speak for the people of Old Town. It's to enable the people of Old Town to speak for themselves, to get to roll up their sleeves, to get involved in the hard work of making that community what they want it to be. And our role is to facilitate what the people want to do and not to speak for them. And I think that's something we have to attend to as we look at ourselves. There are many of us, and many of us are in the room, who make our dollar and pay our bills representing people who may do better speaking directly for themselves. And we need to rethink our role as facilitators and not just merely as advocates.
Well, it's fascinating to hear everything that's been discussed today, because it's really broken it down for me as well, working in the Hispanic business community and also just overall in the community. And it's true, people do think that it's to connect to you, you either have to write a check or go to a fundraiser or anything like that. And I appreciate and applaud all of your honesty and that you're having this, truly candid conversation. And one of the things we do want to do is have the audience do a question and answers, because I wanted to see exactly where you all were, where your thought process was, and I think it's beautiful because it's a very open and a very honest dialogue. So we'd like to start our question and answer segment. Do you have I'm sorry. Yes, sir?
Maggie, I'm not quite sure what you meant by trade association. I'm a member of Local 24 of the International Brotherhood of Electric Workers. And I know that our leadership is coming to educate us on voting in our best interest. So they identify candidates that have voted pro-working class, pro-worker legislation. Helen Bentley was one of those candidates that we supported. Not because she was a Democrat, not because she was a Republican, but she was doing the right thing. There are other friends. Maggie, I think you're a friend of working people. I know that you've voted many times for legislation that's on our behalf. I think that speaking with fellow workers, that one reason they're disengaged is that they don't necessarily feel, there's a perception that the political system is not working for them. If you're an unemployed worker that's been unemployed for 2 years or more, well, the political system is not working for them. If you're a poor person on the west side or the east side and a Democrat's in office, you're still poor, you're still struggling. If a Republican is in office, you're still poor and you're still struggling. So I think that if you want the people to become more engaged, that there has to be a sense that there's something in it for them. If you have a system where there's a perception that the wealthy control politics, that money buys politics, then there needs to be a change to that. There needs to be a redistribution of wealth. There needs to be a balance between corporate power and people power. And when we have representatives that portray that and fight for that, then I think it gets the working people and the public excited about being involved. That being said, I do believe there's a big difference between grassroots politicians, local politicians, and those they call inside the Beltway. I think there is a difference. And hats off to you. I believe in our local government, and I just wish you well.
Let me comment on that. We talked a little bit about campaign finance. I have to correct my dear friend, Congresswoman Bentley. It doesn't cost $3,000 or $4,000 to run for Congress. It costs million. I'm sorry. It costs 30 to 40 million. 30 to 40 million. No, to run for the House. I can tell you it's gone up in recent years. And I'm not going to tell you what. Now, in Maryland, we're pretty cheap, I have to tell you, but you wait till Senator Mikulski retires and see what that race costs the next United States
She's
Senator.
never going to retire.
But let's hope not. But let me just say, I knew I would step on a toe if I mentioned advocacy groups, trade organizations, so on and so forth. I knew I would step. Not all are equal. I'm not putting all of them in that bucket. But I will say that you're exactly right. Right or wrong, I will tell you, I hear from union leadership. I am a very pro-union person. You know that. I vote very consistently with the working man and woman in Maryland. But I think what we're trying to get at today, and I think what actually April's trying to get at today, is we need to kind of remove you know, the union leaders and get closer to the union workers to really understand. And I think that sometimes, not all the time, trade associations, groups, advocacy groups kind of become almost a barrier. It's easy for me to talk to, you know, Pat Leopold and, you know, Glenn Middleton and da-da-da. It's very easy. But it's harder to really get out there and talk to a group of workers, AFSCME workers or somebody like that. And I think that's what we need more of. That's what I mean by that. And I also think that there are groups that come down and misrepresent, you know, what the constituency really wants. But we are actually all on the same page. I think John and I absolutely agree that, you know, the role of organizations and groups and leaderships of trade organizations and advocacy groups should be to get the people that they're representing in front of elected officials and in a dialogue with elected officials and step out of the way so that the conversation can begin. I really believe that should be more of the role.
Another question?
Yes, how you doing? My name is Joseph Kane. My question is for the current elected officials. Earlier, Delegate Washington was getting to the point that political literacy, what does it mean? And my question is, where, you know, what kind of plan do you guys have in place, or is there a plan in place to actually educate the masses on the political system in, you know, just forget America, in Baltimore, you know, how the political landscape is and how it works, you know. And is there a fear that if the masses knew how it worked, that it would work against the people that stay in office now?
Well, since I stepped into that one, I'll talk about that. One of the things I talked about, and actually we've talked about as a delegation, and those of you that do follow Twitter and Facebook, I just sort of start doing Politics 101 and just basic, you know, how many representatives we have and how many senators we have. I'd like us to have workshops on a regular basis, go around to schools. I'd like to, I talked with Senator Ferguson about us perhaps going and reading in kindergarten classes. I think that we really have to improve the delivery of civic understanding and understanding of government in our schools. In our community associations. I know that I want to spend a lot of time making sure that people know what it is, what is my purview, not as an excuse or to say, hey, you know, I'm on appropriations, so I don't care about what goes on in the health and government operations, but more of, you know, so that I can best, so that you know best how to ask me or how to use me, how I can best serve you, is for you to know. So for me, an educated public, I think is the best public. And all of us have got to feel that if everyone knows, then we would hope that they would choose us. So for me, I want people to know and want them to fully understand. Are there some folks who are very invested in the people that always show up in the primaries and they have built and only have relationships with those people and that gets them reelected and reelected? Yes, that is the case. But we also have great models, certainly in 2008, where we've expanded that electorate. We also have had elected officials who have, and I happen to be part of a delegation of, even when we expand the number of people that vote, they do very well. And so I think if people are doing their job and they're representing people, you know, and I guess, yeah, Maggie, you got the top vote, you know, during the primary. And, you know, and so we're all pretty close together. So again, I believe that I'm going to say truth will set us free, and that's the best way. So.
I think the more highly educated folks are about the political process, the actually easier it makes all of our jobs. April was with us at a forum in the 43rd District this summer, and the questions and the dialogue back and forth between all of the candidates who were running, there were 6 or 7 of us for 3 spots. I mean, at one point, she was just shaking her head. I think that's why she's got us here, because people were asking questions of people running for the state that had nothing to do with state government. I mean, there really was and then candidates would answer them as if they could do something if elected, which was, I think, even worse, you know? Because you talk about political literacy, I mean, you just got to take a moment and say, I'm not trying to put this off on somebody else, but let me just say that's not what my office would do if I were elected to it. And I do think, I'm going to give you another example and then I'll shut up. I tend to hog the microphone. I was at a summit of the governors yesterday on environment and sustainability. And the governor had gone out on the street a couple of days before in preparation for it. And actually, you should all ask yourself this question. He walked up to people and said, how do you define sustainability? How do you define sustainability? And I want you to think about what you think when I ask you that question, because this is part of this literacy that we're talking about, okay? And the answer to that, you know, could vary, but I will tell you, and what was hopeful for me is what came out of that entire summit yesterday was that the #1 priority for sustainability that came out of every group, every breakout group, was the support of urban centers in our state. And so I don't know what you thought sustainability was, but think about it and go home, look it up, Google it, figure it out, think about it. But that's what the answer was out of every breakout group, which did my heart good. But see, we need to educate ourselves on what you know, the political literacy and the political dialogue is today.
Just one quick little addition. I think the great equalizer here is going to be social media and the expansion of the internet. I think as we have more transparency and more availability to see what politicians do on a daily basis, the better it will be for educating people how things happen. And so I have to give a good shout out to Dave Troy and Rob Ray, who have really pushed hard to get web streaming of city council hearings. I believe there should be, you know, recorded and saved webinar, or I guess web streams of Senate proceedings and delegate proceedings in Annapolis.
There are next year.
Yes, but not in the Senate though, not video.
Oh, when that House, we're ahead of them.
Right, yeah, way ahead. But like you said, I think there is a disincentive at times to have access to information about how the process works. And until, you know, there is a demand from the public to have greater transparency, and it's something, you know, it's hard to, there's a self-interest for politicians to keep the system closed and only be able to message what's good for that individual politician.
The Congress is on C-SPAN all the time that it's in session. There's one channel for the House of Representatives, and there's one channel for the Senate, a different channel. So that anytime you want to see what's happening in Washington on the floor, you just turn on C-SPAN. I don't know what the channels are here in the city. And it depends on whether you have Fios or Comcast or whoever. But they are on C-SPAN, and you can watch that on a day-to-day basis.
Could I turn that question around just a bit? One of the things that I think increases the effectiveness of government and the representativeness of government is not just for the people to know what the politicians do, it's helpful for the politicians to know what the people are doing.
Right. Exactly.
To get out in the community and see, you know, one of the premises of federalism is that the states are such catalysts of experimentation. Well, in the communities, community groups are catalysts, extraordinary catalysts of experimentation. That one of the significant advantages of wealth, and I'm saying there are many, is the ability to initiate a solution and not just articulate a need. Well, in many communities, there are people out there initiating solutions that many people who have elective office might do well to find out about and begin to figure out how you can support through public policy.
We're going to take a moment to pause for the cause because some breaking news just came to our attention from one of our social media savvy members of the audience, and I want him to share it.
Yeah, I'm afraid to announce that apparently Congresswoman Gabriel Giffords was killed just about an hour ago by some lone gunman who also killed 6 other people in Tucson, Arizona. You know, there's it's not known, you know, what motive, if any, this man had, but it certainly it's cause for pause and you know, reflection on you know, the darkest elements of what political figures have to do, and maybe it's time we can dial back some of the emotional volume in politics.
Let's take a moment of silence, please. Thank you. We're going to continue with the questions. What I'm going to ask is that we ask 3 questions at a time so we can try to get as many of you in as possible. And if you could keep them to questions that are crisp and core, we'll probably be able to get to the back of the room before the end. Thank you.
Thank you, April. The scary part of that is that they were having a dialogue about, open dialogue about Congress, and to talk to her with her community about what needed to be discussed and what she needed to take back to Washington with her. So that's very, very sad. Anyway, we have 3 questions. We have 3 questions. We have, okay, oh, the mic, please. Thank you.
First, I just want to say I do apologize for what just happened to the Congresswoman, but I do want to say that I believe I've been in community organizing and advocacy for 26 years, ever since I was 14, trying to save neighborhood libraries. But I think, like an example, not with the current thing that happened at City Hall, I've been at City Hall at a couple of hearings, and I see that when there's a replacement, how there are individuals from the community, we write 200 to 300 letters to the council who nominates the actual replacement. And I think it's a disconnect because a lot of times the individuals in the community believe their voice is not being heard because they wonder how can they give so much support towards a candidate that they feel will represent their community, yet that candidate never gets picked. So I think somewhere along the way, it's a disconnect between the community. There's a lot of misconceptions about community organizations, organizers, the politics, and I just think that I'm glad and blessed that this is the start and the beginning of a face-to-face dialogue. I've been in Baltimore when you used to come into political figure office, tell them what, you know, just talk to them as a human being, a regular person, and now it is a sentiment that you feel like you have to have money or you have to be in a certain clique to have your voice heard in Baltimore, and I believe if we can sit down and continue these talks, we can turn Baltimore City around. That's all I'll say. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Zach Murray. I'm a senior at Cornell, but also a lifelong resident of the 43rd District. I have a question about the, mainly for the delegate and the senator, delegates and the senator here. The governor is prepared to spend $300 million to build a new prison facility here in Baltimore. Given the austerity facing the city and the state, as well as the fact that there's an increasing amount of evidence that shows that mass incarceration simply isn't good policy, what is your stance on that? If yes, you support the expansion of the prison, could you please explain why? And if no, could you possibly discuss what you intend to do to stop the governor? And I guess the main reason why I ask this, just if I can give my opinion, is I think the fact that we can find $300 million to incarcerate but not to educate is just insulting as a product of the Baltimore school system.
So, again, you should, oh, I'm sorry, 3 at a time, that's right.
I'm going to ask a very political question, and that is, as a registered independent, is Maryland ever going to consider an open primary? Because when you talk about engagement, I have not been able to vote in Maryland since I came back to Maryland, and I've been an independent since I was 18 years old.
Good. Thank you very much. Mary, you were going to?
Oh, so that's 3? Is that,
yes,
oh.
3. Mm-hmm.
Oh, wait, I guess I missed the first
Whichever,
one.
respond to the one you're most
right.
comfortable with.
I got it. Again, I guess I was going to say, you know, those of us who are holding office, you have to know they're real little shaken up that someone in the middle of having a direct engagement with her public would be killed. So you have to understand that there's a big risk in what we do, in addition to putting our lives on hold in terms of running for office and answering your phone calls and caring about you and laboring over every decision and knowing that we have to look at revenues coming in and revenues going out, and making sure that people have health care, and that people have a right to choose or to marry who they love or to take care of their children. That these are things, and again, I understand the frustration that we get on particular issues, but please, in this moment, take an opportunity to have some empathy for us as you go forward, to understand that the work that we do is very difficult. It is indeed clearly very risky, and it is in fact done with you and your interests in mind. Having said that, additionally, I've been on record and to feel that we should not be incarcerating people, that is not the answer, that we need to invest in young people, that the detention center to hold youth charged with adult crimes, is on hold. And there's also another prison that is designed to also house women detainees as well. So we do need to figure out what do we do in our communities with people who are convicted of crimes against the public. And again, I'm not talking about someone being caught with a bag of weed or various things. So these are very serious questions, and some people do need to be put away for a time. The lawsuit that led to the solution, which probably wasn't a good one, to just design a prison, had to do more with how we're going to provide services to people while they're detained, while they're, we hope, recovering and being rehabilitated. So what I would ask those of you who I do know that are very committed to this, I've gone to your rallies, I've supported that, is that you also have to come back additionally with a solution that does not sort of set up few people that have convicted sort of lower level crimes and make the public believe that we're talking about incarcerating people that have just simply made a mistake. And so we have to figure out, what do you do with folks that are chronically engaged in bad behavior that's not in the public interest?
I'll take a stab at answering that too. And Mary started down the path that I would start down. I don't think anyone in our delegation supports building jails over public education or building jails. In fact, these projects are on hold. But I will say this, we have found in our district, as we did public forums during the campaign, that there's varying opinions on this. We've had in the 43rd district, just in recent weeks, a citizen walk out their front door to walk their dog and they were shot. And we've had multiple, unfortunately, murders in our district. And so, community folks have varying, there has to be a solution to what do we do now with the people who have actually taken someone else's life, and so on and so forth. But another thing that I would say is that once we incarcerate people, we turn them out on the streets with a little bit of money when when it's time for them they've served their time, they get to be let go with a little bit of money, and we really don't do much at all, if anything, to help them on their way to another life, and a new life, and a more productive life, a life without crime. So I will say this, I think that would be the area that, in terms of kind of, the whole incarceration policy in the state, that we need to look very closely at. We used to do a better job with education inside the prisons. And, when I moved to Maryland in 1970, I registered as an independent. Now, I'm going to tell you this with a smile on my face, because I moved from a state called Kansas, where I couldn't find a Democratic Party anywhere, so I didn't know that there was an alternative to the Republicans. Sorry, Helen, but I wanted one, okay? So I just registered independent, and then I figured out what you figured out, which was I can't do anything. So, of course, I moved to becoming a Democrat, and proud to be one, but I do support open primaries.
I do too.
Yeah,
I do too.
I'll jump in really quickly to, first about the juvenile facility. I firmly believe, as a former teacher, that education is the true solution to our long-term problems with crime in the city. I don't think that there are a lot of juveniles in the city that are looking at violence and criminal activity as a choice that they are making. I mean, it's an intentional choice, but I believe that if they had other opportunities and other options, they would engage in those options. That said, I had the opportunity to teach in the Eager Street Academy, which is the school within central booking that is for juveniles charged as adults. And the facilities there are abominable. And so I want to make sure that, you know, I do say that there does need to be a better facility for those juveniles. The problem is the assumptions by which the new one was being built. It was saying that there was going to be 280, I believe, more juveniles arrested in the next 10 years, and just is a failure to think that we can actually solve a problem. Open primaries, firm believer. I grew up in a household where my dad was a commercial real estate developer, and my mom worked for the Amalgamated Transit Union for 24 years. So I had a very divergent political upbringing, which was very contentious growing up, but what it let me see is that people can differ politically and still love each other. And so I think, you know, there is cause to believe that nobody holds the right, nobody holds all rights to all knowledge when it comes to political engagement.
Let me just support an open primary. Sorry, I got focused on the other issue because it's an important one. But
I was about to say that I think it's a mistake for us to limit our political focus to either the holding of or competition for political office. We all live in this community, whether we hold the office or not, and we all have a role and a benefit to be gained by solving these problems. And as someone who is focused outside the political process on changing what happens in communities, private citizens have a critical role to be played in the resolution of problems of public policy. Public officials do not have a monopoly on good ideas. They come from you. And to the extent you're not an elected official, you have a good idea, the place, the arena where those ideas get played out is the community. Get involved, get those ideas and those solutions out there so those of you who happen to be more politically focused can point to them, can share them with the elected officials up here, because who gives them those ideas? And what they're left with are the prisons you don't like, the schools that don't seem to work. Create the new solutions.
Yes, the microphone, where is that? Okay.
Right here.
Yes, sir, please. Yes,
My name is Coley Tengela. I am a Baltimore City public theater arts teacher at a public charter school in East Baltimore, and was newly named a 2010 Open Society Fellow. Thank you. In terms, for full disclosure, I am a strong supporter of Ms. Murray Washington, who's on the stage, and I know of the fantastic work of Ms. Maggie McIntosh through my working with Murray Washington. So I know that what I'm about to say does not apply to them. But I've been very concerned by some of the comments coming from the stage by the elected officials, a certain level of us, the populace, the voting public, having deference to you when the dynamic is that you all work for us, to be quite frank. When it comes to political literacy, I used to believe, and I still believe in my heart, that it's your obligation as someone who sought this political office to come back to those of us who don't know and teach us the political process so that we can become empowered and we express our concerns to you and you go forth. Since you work for us, we pay for you by our votes and go out and do for us what we want you to do for us to empower our community. I'm very disturbed by this reverse dynamic of power. Elected official government, at least in this country at this point in time, I believe, is we the people sitting here, you on stage elected by us, you work for us. Therefore, it's your obligation. You sought this position. You educate us on how the political process works. We tell you what we want, and you go and make it happen. Whether it's a pothole in front of our street, or a toxic waste dump being near our home, or my nephew needing a summer job. You work for me. Go do it, and then tell me what deals has to be cut when you come back to the community. That's what I believe is happening, and I'm so concerned that that dynamic has changed for the worse. Public officials work for the people. Could you address that, please?
I'll jump in. First and foremost, I 1,000% respect your passion and belief in this. I, as a former educator, especially in the Baltimore City Public Schools, I firmly believe there is an obligation and a duty on public officials to educate their constituents about the process. Here's the one thing where I want to push back a little bit. The idea that public officials work for voters is not 100% possible, because at the end of the day, not all voters agree on the same thing. So one voter in one neighborhood could say, I want to have more public charter schools, we need to have more school options. Well, another voter in the same district but in a different neighborhood could say, public charter schools are the worst thing to happen to public education. And so as a public official, it would be theoretically impossible to satisfy both voters' desires. And so that's where it comes down to making the individual choice, and me as a public official engaging in researching and doing the work that I need to do to make sure that I'm making good public policy so that the most voters in the district are satisfied. But to satisfy every voter's whim is impossible, and at times could prevent us from making the tough short-term decisions that will have long-term benefits. That's my one piece of pushback.
Yeah, and can I say something about that? Some of the greatest leaders in this country voted against their constituents' beliefs. Some of the greatest leaders in this country voted to give women the right to vote, voted to provide public access for people of all color. Some of those constituents back home, in some cases the majority of their constituents didn't agree with their vote. So sometimes I do think we started out asking the first day the question about leadership. I mean, you support Mary Washington because you think she's going to be a leader. She may not go do what you want her to do all of the time, okay? And I just want to say that because I think it's real important to know that when we get in to Annapolis or Congress and so on and so forth, sometimes we do take votes that not everybody agrees on, not everybody wants us to do. We actually hear we get a lot of letters from back home saying don't, and yet we do. And we do it because there are some issues, some questions before us that are for the greater good. And they do help constituents, or would help Maryland or a constituent group generally. And those, by the way, you know, what to do with immigration, gay marriage, pro-choice abortion, pro-life. I mean, we could go around this room and there would not be consensus on a lot of these issues. And so we have to actually decide where we're going to go on each of those issues, kind of following our own moral compass and deciding what is better for the greater good.
Okay. I have to echo what what Maggie McIntosh just said. The reason that you elect somebody in 99% of the cases is that that person does have leadership qualities, and with that can make decisions, or should be able to make decisions, on how to do this or that. I can tell you, and I probably go through and name a lot of instances where I had constituents who wanted this, and I had them who wanted that. It was up to me to get these two together. And if I didn't, then I am not the right person to be there.
Well, if I might, I think I'm going to do what I do best and try to sort of reframe what my constituent is saying in a way that more of us can hear it. I think that what the pushback I think it was responding to is that, and again, it's probably not the people that are up here, but I think that there was a little bit of a discussion of kind of flipping it back onto the public. And I think we started a discussion, I think I talked a little bit about, most people are trying to get to work, they're trying to pay their bills, they're trying to, so in some sense, they don't have the privilege that a certain class of people, not just the elected officials, but maybe the other 25% of those, who don't really have that time or the ability or the confidence to sort of articulate their desires. So there are some elected officials who will kind of hide behind that and say, well, I can't make a decision on this because I haven't heard from the public, or I haven't heard from the public on this, or let the public vote, and thereby abdicating the type of responsibility that all of my colleagues here are saying is that we willingly take, that it's, yes, we're represented, but we also are hired for our discernment. So we're, in that sense, you hire someone to be a manager, you don't say, well, do you want me to hire this person, that person, every single decision. You're sort of you're asking us to make decisions based on what we generally know about what's in the best interests of you. So, so I just wanted to try to say, so I think that's what was coming there, is that there is a reality in that sometimes we hide behind and use an excuse, you know, people's own inability or their exclusion from a process to justify why we don't engage them. Would that be correct?
Thank you very much. Yes, sir.
Yeah, well, I want to piggyback off all of those sentiments because I'm with Michael Scott with Equity Matters, and we're part of a learning community that is, you know, out of a think tank that was designed for elected officials, but we are learning from other communities as community groups. Every 3 or 4 months, we go to a different community. We hear how those communities are solving their own problems. But then it's a challenge to engage you on best and most promising practices. And so I would challenge you to offer some opportunities so that there is an opportunity for engagement because we're all evidence-based, research-driven. So it's not about, you know, just voice. It's can you prove it? And the other part of that is one of our core principles is that the people closest to the problems need to be authentically part of the solution, which I think is to your point. And that means community-based participatory research. So with those two principles and going around outside of our community, we try to come back here and you're not listening to us. And so that's a problem. And I can show you specific legislation at the state level, at the local level, health and all policies, equitable, I mean, we are so far, and April gets on me for criticizing, but I have a solution. We have solutions. They're not the only ones. But we'd like to get a hearing as to why we're not able to present those. And by the way, sustainability, we're able to change national policy at HUD. And sustainability there means equity. It's about how promised neighborhoods and choice neighborhoods filter into sustainable. And Maryland's not getting that money because we're not having that conversation. And I think it's because we're not engaged in the same way that some of our team member communities across the country are engaged with the community authentically being at the table as part of it. And I'd like to hear how you would suggest we change some of that.
We're going to have one more question, please.
Yeah, I wasn't sure what.
Good afternoon. Well, my question, I guess it's not a question, it's just an observation, because I thought Delegate McIntosh was on something. I noticed that you didn't say unions, but the reality is, and I'm a recovering Democrat, a recovering operative and all that, so I don't get no satisfaction out of doing this. I just want to make this analysis, because I do think that it's a crime that there are unions, whoever they are, and they do. They focus on unions specifically. They focus on union turnout. They focus on the fact that only every 2 years or every 4 years do they come to the community. So my question is specific. What can you do to encourage unions or anyone else to invest in the community? Because they don't do that now. They invest in unions, corporations invest in corporations, and quite frankly, speaking as a former hospital lobbyist, hospitals focus on how hospitals can make money. So my question to you is, what can you do, or what have you thought about doing to enforce the investment of the same lobbyists that come to your office year after year to invest back into the community?
That's a good question.
Let me just get the third question. Just 1 second. Let's get the third question.
Thanks. First, I want to say, as a resident of the 46th district, just when you started to feel like you just can't break the cycle, I look at someone like Bill Ferguson that was able to win over a really, really long-term incumbent. And I love George Dell, a very good friend, but congratulations to you.
Thank you.
And it's kind of like, okay, I get back in the game, gives me a little hope. So here's my question. Early on was talking about engagement in maybe like a decade ago. the city of Baltimore changed the law, and maybe Mr. Jones can comment about this, about aligning the city elections with the presidential, I think, right, as a way to save money,
Or the state.
get greater turnout. And so the city passes the law, but then I believe it's our president of the Senate who decided, I'm not really into that, and that, because then the law had to be changed from the state level to say we're going to agree to align these elections, and they wouldn't do it. Why? And like, I think that's a perfect example of where people in the city tried to be smart about something, and you know, a handful of players at the state were like, yeah, we don't want that.
Well, let me just say this, and of course, a lot of the discussion this afternoon is based on the elected officials here. Of course, as you know, I am a state employee. My focus is to run elections, not basically to, in an open forum, give my personal opinion on how I feel about most of the subject matter, but is to talk about the importance of elections and voting. The last question came up several years ago where the bill was put in to align the election to save money. And basically, politically, it died. And most of the elected officials in this city, as well as the state, knows that it's more of a safe seat kind of thing, because that way they can run for another office, state office or city office, and still have their position. Now, if that was the overall reason, and it was a local issue, and a lot of times when local issues hit Annapolis, they leave the discretion up to the local delegates and senators. If it's something that they don't want, they may not do it. Now, the same thing I feel about early voting. 6 days to me was too long, stressful on a staff. 14 hours a day, then lead into election day. 2008, leading up to the Obama election, my staff worked a month and a half, 12, 14 hours a day because of deadlines that we have to meet. The week before the closing of the books for voter registration, we had 30,000 registrations in my office that we had 1 week to put on the books. We worked every day during the week, we worked Saturdays, and we worked Sundays to get it done because it's mandated that it be done in a certain time. So, you know, there are some things that we can do. I've talked to several senators and several delegates to try to do some things with some deadlines. We have elections coming here in the city this year for mayoral election. The statute calls for early voting for the local election, but not like the statewide election. It doesn't tell us when the early voting shall be. So that's something we have to look at and determine when that early voting will happen. One of the things that I've tried to advocate, and of course I heard some of the other questions, and I think is important, when I have issues with bills that affect elections, I go to Annapolis and I testify. Either I'm for it or I'm against it, and I give the reason why. Because a lot of times if you are not the quote-unquote expert in the field, you don't know how it affects what you do. And we have a lot of times that we do have some of our delegation that will put in bills, and they have no clue what that bill will do or how it will affect the elections or the election process. The first one of the bills that was put in for early voting from the beginning, I think had us go all the way till Friday to, for early voting, and then have election day on Tuesday, which we needed at least 5 days to have turnaround to update the e-poll books to show that persons had already voted in early voting, and to upgrade the equipment for election day. So there are some things that, you know, we're working on to do that, but the ultimate goal is if there's something that's happening, you need to go and testify. Sign up, go down and testify.
So will the current elected state officials
Well, the only thing I do is if the delegation asks me a question, I give them my opinion. And it's up to them to, to move forward with what they think is best. I don't have a problem in saying it will save us money. I don't have a problem in saying that there are too many days in early voting. I don't have a problem in saying we need to change deadlines.
Here's why that never gets changed. First of all, it used to be that Baltimore, had the largest delegation. Now we're kind of a medium-sized delegation. It used to be, in fact, it seems like it still is, that the mayor of Baltimore, seemed to end up being governor, And so they never wanted them to align because they wanted the mayor of Baltimore to be able to run for governor without giving up his or her seat. That's the answer, okay? And that also, there are a couple of other elected offices that people think Baltimore will lead the way. That's becoming less and less true. We're now 5th in the state in terms of voting strength as an entity, as a county, city jurisdiction instead of 1st. And I think it makes absolute sense to align our elections with the state elections or presidential elections. One of the things that it would ensure if we aligned our, I think more so with the state. I would rather see it because presidential primaries, we have very low voter turnout. But the state elections, I think if you align city elections with the state elections, we'd have larger voter turnout, period, in all of our districts. I do believe that. And then secondly, I would say this. I have always believed that the easier you make it for people to vote, the more people are going to vote. And so I wouldn't even quibble over how many days we should do early vote. We should look at other states that have mail-in voting. So you don't even have to go anywhere to vote. You can, they mail out the ballot, and you get the ballot, you fill it out, and so on and so forth. Or if you want to go to your poll, then take your little ballot to the poll with you and stick it in a box. Or early vote. We should devise ways to get people to vote starting far earlier than we do now. I thought it was the early vote experience in the city, I thought was fabulous.
Before the point is lost, I think the point that was being made by the grassroots community participants, I won't call you advocates or activists, I'll call you participants, should be noted. There is an infrastructure of disengagement, a political disengagement in the city and in the state. And if what you're trying to do is to create just the opposite, an infrastructure of political engagement, your principal ally is going to be that segment of the state's action, which is driven by grassroots community efforts to solve problems in communities. And what we have with elections is maybe 6 days out of every 4 years in which we want citizens to be involved. What you have in that infrastructure of community-based action are people who are involved in solving civic problems 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. If what you want is engagement, you create an infrastructure built around the activity of those organizations. Organizations also like the one that we have in Old Town. What I think it also needs to be done, that infrastructure has to be connected directly, tangibly, and purposefully with the political infrastructure, because right now it's disconnected.
I come from the school of thought of the Paul Wellstone model, so I did this Wellstone training. Paul Wellstone's a late senator who died in a plane crash, but was very grassroots organized and focused. And he, sort of the model that they project is that the infrastructure of the campaign, when a politician wins the election, if that infrastructure goes away, the same infrastructure that was educating voters about the candidate, if it goes away to educate voters about the issues, then that politician has failed. And so I am currently very much looking to figure out a way to sustain that infrastructure into the legislative model. Would love to talk to you afterwards, too, about particular things you see helpful. But I don't know, and it's hard to keep the momentum. That's what I'm finding now, is to keep that same election momentum into the General Assembly process. So I'm looking for any idea out there to figure out a way to keep people engaged and keep that infrastructure in motion. And I do support aligning the elections, and thank you.
One of the reasons I ran is that I'm a social scientist by training, and I've worked in government as well, and also in nonprofits, and have done more sort of organizing on the ground, of late. And these communities are at times at cross purposes and don't speak the same language at times. And so I found when I worked for city government, there were people that were interested in lead policy and et cetera. And they take a lot of words to explain what they need to do. And I learned that in working in the government agencies is that they kind of needed the bullet point version of it. Many of us might enjoy the long, kind of clearly, I like to make long explanations. But we have to be, when you're a policy person, a research person, we actually have to be more disciplined in getting to the point. And then as elected officials, we have to be more tolerant in actually doing the research and listening and trying to understand. So, and then there's the foundation communities and other people. So I think that we're gonna learn that by doing it. You're going to learn it by coming out of the research and participating and visiting in Annapolis. We're going to learn it by, listening and learning some more of the research. And you're absolutely right about community-oriented, community action research, that is really one of the best ways to get some of this work done.
Thank you very much.
Maria, may I make a comment, please?
Certainly.
Open primaries were touched on here briefly. I think open primaries will do a great deal to arouse the interest in this state. What is the number, do you know the number of independents registered compared to the?
Well, this year, as far there is no what we call independent party anymore in the state of Maryland. You're unaffiliated.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's a large number.
It's a large number.
All right. Then it's up to each party
very large
to allow open voting in their primary. And that was the Republicans had that here a few years ago.
Yeah, the Republicans, I think, requested through the state legislature to have independents to vote on the Republican ticket. That was done several times, I guess, 10 years ago, 15 years ago.
10, 12 years ago. They did do that, and I don't know why it was stopped, but it shouldn't have been stopped. But it is up to the party. Open primaries would do a great deal to generate more interest in the election process. And I want to say this. I am no longer an elected official, never will be. I'm a few years over the hill. But let me say that those who are elected officials work hard. They do not lay on their backs, believe me, and sit on their fannies and not do things. It is not an easy job, and they do all deserve all of the attention and credit that they earn. They earn a lot that they deserve. And let me say, be proud of them and work with them. Raise hell if they go the wrong way, but they do work hard.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Well, I want to thank everyone for this incredible dialogue, and we just see the different mechanics involved, our political representatives, our community. We see with the Board of Elections the dynamics that have to take place for things to really be looked at, and policy that makes changes, and that policy comes from the people. It comes from our community, and that's really one of the very, very important messages that we need to leave here today. And I would love very much to thank this incredible panel: Armstead, B.C. Jones, Bill Ferguson, Helen Bentley, John Morris,